Hello everybody, welcome back to NEET Made Simple by PEBBLEZ Pedagogy. I would like to continue with where I left you in the previous video. We were discussing about binomial names. We have looked at the rules which one needs to follow if he or she is willing to write or type a binomial name or a scientific name to make it much more simpler for you. Okay, now moving further, we must acknowledge the fact that Carolus Linnaeus was a naturalist who has described most of the plants and animals, and hence you can see many of the scientific names ending with or they have a small little abbreviation of L being written beside them. For example, tomato and potato are a few examples which I have taken up to give you an idea of what I am talking about. Tomato is scientifically called as Solanum lycopersicum. Alright, scientifically if I'm writing it separately, underlining them separately. Now, many a places you see that besides lycopersicum, they would have written L and a dot, or in many instances they would have written LINN dot. That means this is the name of the naturalist who has described this plant initially. Okay, so there was one more example of potato which I would like to give you. The scientific name of potato is Solanum tuberosum. And it was also described initially by Linnaeus, hence the letter L followed by a full stop. So when I write something like this, at the moment you will be able to understand that the first part of this is a scientific name. The first part of the scientific name is the name of the genus to which the plant or animal belongs to. The second part is the name of the species, and the letter with a full stop followed by a full stop indicates or refers to the name of the scientist or the taxonomist or the naturalist or the person who would have described it for the first time. Okay, so why is it necessary to describe these plants? I think we have already discussed on on the need to describe or identify any living organism, right? In my previous video, you can refer back to that. Now, let me make this process much more relatable for you. Imagine that I have provided you with a box full of chocolates. Okay, now I ask you to sort them or segregate them. What would you do at first instance? You would probably look at them for a few seconds, then you may segregate a few of the similar looking ones. You may pick them off, right? Similar looking ones, or which which are having similar color. Let me change here. Okay, you might put these things into a different group, and the ones which are having heart shape might be of a different group. The one which look, or some of them looks like rectangular blocks or barrels, you may segregate them into another group, right? One more is here. So what are you doing here? You're segregating, you're sorting them into different groups. And how did you get to know that they are to be placed in this group only? Because you have identified a few observable characters, right? I repeat, you have identified or you have sorted this box full of chocolates which I would have given you into different groups based on some similar observable characters or similar characters which you can easily make out. This process is called as classification. Now, don't think that I have gone crazy to be talking to you about chocolates. I just wanted to relate chocolates, I mean, bring in the example or idea of chocolates so that you can relate it to what we are discussing now. So, I think that was enough of distraction for me. So classification of living organisms is required because, as we have already discussed, there are about 1.7 to 1.8 million species, right? And it is quite a task, quite a difficult task to describe all these things. So instead, they can be classified into groups, and each group can be described with ease. That was the sole purpose of classifying living organisms. So I repeat myself or reiterate myself, since it is nearly difficult to study all living organisms which inhabit the earth, it would be ideal or it is necessary to think of some means to make this possible. All right, and uh, this process is called as classification. How do you define classification? Definitions are always important. It is classification is defined as the process. Isn't it a process? You're sorting it, you're separating it. It is a process by which anything is grouped. Okay, it is grouped into convenient categories. And how do you group them into convenient categories? Based on some, not all, remember, based on some easily observable characters. Okay, let me reiterate that for you. We have understood the definition of classification and the need for classifying living organisms with the help of a simple example of a box full of chocolates and segregating them out. So definition of classification is, or definition for classification is the process of wherein it is called as process I am so sorry. My apologies. I would like to repeat. Classification is the process by which anything is grouped into convenient categories based on some easily observable characteristic. Now, if you take the example of any other plant or animal instead of the chocolate which we have discussed here, now if I tell you, if I ask you to think of a mosquito, for example, if I ask you to think of a mosquito, what are the first few characters which you can think of? Obviously, you're not thinking of an elephant, do you? There is stark difference between the characters which are displayed or which mosquitoes possess from that of an elephant, isn't it? So why do you think I'm bringing these examples? This will help you to understand the importance of why we have to learn all these things. Some of you might feel that, oh, this is so boring, but trust me, it all makes sense. So when I ask you to think of mosquito, you'll think of something which is tiny, which can fly, that will have wings, right? And it will be biting you, obviously, not with the teeth, but with some sharp, pointy proboscis kind of a thing, isn't it? And you're definitely not going to imagine an elephant when I ask you to think of a mosquito, because elephant has totally different characteristic features. It has four limbs, right? It has a trunk, right? Then tusks, or those long teeth which are curved. It has a small tail. Obviously it is quite large animal, as against as or opposite to a mosquito, isn't it? So this is an important aspect wherein we can easily recognize groups of such plants and animals, or be it microorganisms, by describing them. And once we describe, we classify them into various groups. We give them easily observable characters. We observe characters which we can immediately get to know of. So, and we categorize them into groups. Obviously none of us are going to categorize elephant into a mosquito group, obviously, isn't it? Because their characteristics, the characters which I've listed here, can be easily identified and seen and described by anybody. And that is how I would like to bring this idea of classification into your learning. Now, let me go ahead further and say that the scientific term for these various categories into which we classify the living organisms are called as taxonomic categories. You will have to remember this, because we will, in the next slide or the next one or two slides, you'll be learning about various taxonomic categories. And yeah, of course. So I reiterate myself on what scientific or taxonomic categories are. The scientific term given for these plants and animals